The first thing Queen Theris learned about grief was that it had a smell. Sterile, chemical, the kind of clean that comes after someone scrubs away evidence. King Davion had died in their private chambers 36 months ago. The official report called it organ failure. Natural, tragic, unavoidable. The medical examiners showed her data streams and cellular breakdowns in protein markers that meant nothing except one thing: they were lying. She knew poison when she saw it, not because the evidence was obvious, but because it was too perfect. Death rarely came that cleanly, that quietly, leaving a body that looked merely asleep. And Davion had been healthy, vibrant, alive one morning gone by sunset. The court had mourned appropriately. Advisors spoke of continuity and strength. The council offered condolences wrapped in suggestions about remarriage, about succession, about the importance of moving forward. All of it tasted like ash in her mouth. Theris had stood over his body in that too-clean room and made a silent promise. Not vengeance, not yet. First she would survive, then she would learn. Then when she knew every name and every lie, she would act. Patience was a weapon she had learned to wield. Now she sat in the celestial court built into the red rock of New Mexico, surrounded by technology that could scan a grain of sand for anomalies, but could not tell her who had murdered her husband. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity had reached for the stars and found her people waiting. They had built this palace together, human engineering and Etherean design, a symbol of cooperation between worlds. It made for an excellent cage. The morning light filtered through energy lattices that hummed with barely contained power. Her private study overlooked gardens where earth plants grew alongside flora from 7 different star systems. Beautiful, controlled, isolated, just like her. Theris touched the transparent surface of her desk and screens bloomed to life. Reports, security logs, personnel files. The 4th food taster in 18 months had resigned yesterday. Not died this time. Progress, perhaps, or cowardice. The position paid extraordinarily well. It also came with a mortality rate that would make actuaries weep. 4 predecessors, 4 different causes of death. All ruled natural, all suspiciously timed, all leaving her one meal closer to eating something that would kill her. She had stopped attending state dinners, stopped accepting gifts of food, stopped trusting anything she had not personally watched grow from seed to harvest. And even then she hesitated. The court whispered, the cursed queen they called her, the paranoid widow. Let them whisper. Dead queens did not hear gossip. A soft chime announced a visitor. Theris did not look up. Enter. Her head of security, Commander Dax, materialized in the doorway. Human 50-something in career military before joining her service. Reliable in the way Old Stone was reliable. Predictable. Loyal. Probably. She trusted him as much as she trusted anyone, which was not much at all. Your Radiance, the candidate is here. Theris closed the screens with a gesture. Candidate, singular. The employment agency had been very clear that finding someone willing to take the position was becoming increasingly difficult. Word traveled even across star systems. The job that killed everyone stupid enough to accept it. Show him in. She expected another desperate fool. Someone drowning in debt or delusion. What she got was a man who looked like he had already died once and was merely going through the motions. Garrett Hayes stood in her doorway with the posture of someone who had been trained to stand at attention but no longer cared enough to fully commit. Military bearing, yes, but worn down. Faded. He was young, 28 according to his file, but his eyes were older. Much older. Theris recognized that look. She saw it in her mirror every morning. Sit. He sat, no hesitation, no nervousness, no attempt to impress, just compliance. The silence stretched. Theris let it. Silence made people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable people revealed things. Garrett Hayes did not squirm. He did not fill the quiet with words. He simply waited, hands loose in his lap, gaze steady but not challenging. A man who had learned patience the hard way. You understand what this position entails, Theris said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am. 4 men have died in the last 18 months. Yes, ma'am. The pay is exceptional. The survival rate is not. I read the contract. Theris tilted her head, studying him. Her ears distinctly Etherean in their elegant sweep, angled forward slightly. a gesture of attention her kind rarely showed to humans. Why, she asked. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes, not fear, not ambition, something closer to resignation. Need the work, he said simply. There are safer jobs. Probably. You are former military, Marines, deployed twice, honorable discharge. She paused. Medical discharge. Psychological. His jaw tightened. Barely. If she had not been watching closely, she would have missed it. Post-traumatic stress, Theris continued reading from the file she had memorized hours ago. Following an incident in Afghanistan, 3 members of your unit killed. You survived. Yes, ma'am. Do you want to die, Mr. Hayes? The question hung in the air like smoke. He did not flinch. No, ma'am. Then why accept a job that will likely kill you? He met her gaze then, really met it, and what she saw there was not despair, but something worse. Apathy. Because it doesn't matter much either way. Honest, brutally so. Theris appreciated honesty. It was rare enough to be valuable. She stood moving to the window. Below, the garden sprawled in geometric perfection. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. She hated it. I need someone to taste my food before I eat it, she said without turning. Every meal, every drink, every ceremonial dish prepared by chefs who smile too widely and advisors who watch too closely. Understood. If the food is poisoned, you will die, slowly most likely, painfully certainly. Medical science has made murder very creative. I've been briefed. Theris turned back to face him. And if you fail to detect poison, I will die, which means you will have failed in your duty. Does that concern you? Something shifted in his expression. Not much, just a tightening around the eyes, a straightening of the spine. The ghost of the Marine he used to be. Yes, ma'am, that concerns me. Why? Because people dying on my watch concerns me, even if I don't know them yet. There it was. The thing she had been searching for. Not enthusiasm, not heroism, just the stubborn ember of duty that refused to go completely cold. He might not care about his own life, but he cared about failing. That was enough. That was useful. You will start tomorrow, Theris said. Commander Dax will show you to your quarters. You will be assigned an AI assistant to help with the scanning protocols. You will attend every meal I attend. You will taste everything before I do, and you will speak honestly about what you observe. Garrett stood. Yes, your radiance. One more thing, Mr. Hayes. He waited. I chose you because you are broken. Broken men do not scheme. They do not politic. They simply do their job. I need someone who will do the job. For the first time, something like a smile ghosted across his face. Dark, humorless. Then you hired the right man, ma'am. After he left, Theris stood alone in her study for a long time. The light shifted. The gardens below cast longer shadows. She had just hired a man who did not care if he died. To protect a woman who could not afford to trust anyone. It would have to be enough. The first banquet came too quickly. 3 days. That was how long Garrett Hayes had to learn alien toxicology, memorize scanning protocols, and accept that his new job description was professional target. He had handled worse orientations. Barely. Now he stood at the edge of the grand hall, adjusting a uniform that fit better than his old dress blues ever had, and wondered if this was how lambs felt before slaughter. Aware. Resigned. Slightly annoyed. The hall itself was a masterpiece of combined engineering. Human architecture met Etherian energy dynamics in soaring arches that seemed to breathe light. Bioluminescent panels bloomed along the ceiling, responding to the presence of bodies, bathing everything in soft gold. Beautiful. Expensive. The kind of place people went to be seen. Or to die quietly. Nobles drifted past him like currents in water. Alien dignitaries with skin that shifted color based on mood. Human ambassadors in formal wear that cost more than his yearly salary used to be. All of them moving with the practiced ease of people who belonged. Garrett did not belong. He was fine with that. His wrist implant hummed softly, running continuous atmospheric analysis. Air quality normal. Energy signature stable. Toxin levels negligible. The technology was impressive. It was also, he suspected, useless against anyone competent enough to want a queen dead. Real threats did not announce themselves with beeping warnings. They smiled and shook hands and waited. The light changed. Conversations dimmed without anyone signaling silence. Garrett felt it before he saw it, the shift in attention, the collective turning toward the main entrance. Queen Theris entered without fanfare. No trumpets, no announcements, no grand procession. She simply walked into the room and it rearranged itself around her. She wore deep blue, almost black fabric that caught light without reflecting it. Simple, elegant. Her alien features were relaxed, betraying nothing of the tension he was learning to recognize in the subtle angles that shifted with mood. Right now, neutral, controlled. Everything about her was controlled. She moved to the high table with measured grace, acknowledging no one needing to acknowledge no one. This was her court, her cage, her battlefield. Garrett took his position, 3 feet behind her, close enough to react, far enough to be dismissed by anyone not paying attention. The meal began. Servers floated dishes forward on anti-gravity trays, each one a small miracle of molecular gastronomy. Proteins folded into impossible geometries. Vegetables grown in zero-G chambers, their colors too vibrant to be natural. Sauces that shimmered with nanoparticles designed to enhance flavor at the cellular level. Science had made food into art. Art made excellent camouflage for murder. Garrett moved forward for the first course, a pale broth that smelled of something between cinnamon and ozone. His implant scanned. No alerts. He lifted the spoon, tasted, held the liquid on his tongue for a 3-count swallowed. Waited. His heartbeat counted seconds. His implant tracked his biometrics. Everything remained stable. Clear, he murmured. Theris ate, not with enjoyment, just with efficiency. Fuel, not pleasure. The second course, the third, each one tested, analyzed, approved. The ritual became rhythm. Scan, taste, wait, clear, over and over. His stomach began to protest the variety. Too many flavors, too many textures, but nothing dangerous, nothing obvious. Garrett was beginning to think this would be a quiet night when the 7th course arrived. It looked harmless. That was the first warning sign. A delicate spiral of steamed grain, pale and innocent, crowned with a translucent glaze that caught the golden light beautifully. Too beautifully. The kind of beautiful that was trying too hard. He leaned closer, inhaled. The implant read clean, nutrient profile optimal, molecular structure stable. No toxins detected, no allergens flagged. Nothing that should make his training scream danger. But something was wrong. Garrett had learned to trust his gut in Afghanistan, when the desert looked too quiet, when the building felt too empty, when his equipment said safe, but his instincts said run. He had learned that technology could lie, but the hair standing up on the back of his neck usually did not. This smelled wrong, not rotten, not chemical, just wrong in a way he could not name, could not quantify, could not explain to the AI, chirping reassurances in his ear. He hesitated. Queen Theris reached for the dish, her movements precise as always. No hesitation. Why would there be? The scan was clean. The taster had not dropped dead. Protocol said it was safe. Protocol, Garrett suddenly knew with absolute certainty, was about to kill her. Time did that thing it did in combat. Slowed, stretched. Each second became a decision point. He could let it happen. Follow procedure. Not his fault if the tech failed. He had done his job. Except he could see her lifting the fork. Could see the slight tremor in her hand that she hid so well. Could see a woman who had been living in fear for years about to eat the thing she feared most. And he could not watch another person die when he had a chance, any chance to stop it. Don't eat that food. His voice cut across the hall. Too loud, too sharp. The kind of volume that came from shouting warnings across gunfire. The effect was instant. Conversations collapsed into shocked silence. Nobles froze mid-gesture. Somewhere, someone dropped silverware with a clatter that echoed. Queen Theris stopped. The fork hovered inches from her lips. Her eyes, alien and human all at once, locked onto his. Garrett became aware of several things simultaneously. Guards moving toward him with expressions that promised pain. Advisors leaning forward with predatory interest. The entire court watching to see what happened when someone interrupted the queen. And Theris, still frozen, still holding that fork. He had exactly 3 seconds before security hauled him away. 3 seconds to make her understand. It smells wrong, he said, quieter now, but carrying in the silence. I can't prove it. The scanners say it's fine, but it smells wrong. Guards reached him, hands gripped his arms, efficient and firm. Not brutal, not yet. Just a clear message: you have made a mistake. Theris had not moved, had not eaten, had not dismissed the guards or ordered his arrest or done anything except stare at the dish in her hand with an expression he could not read. Then she set it down. Analyze it, so she said. 2 words. Calm, absolute. The kind of command that expected obedience without question. The hall rippled with confusion. Someone cleared their throat. An advisor started to protest about protocol. Theris silenced him with a glance. Court scientists activated scanning arrays Garrett had not known existed. Nanosamplers descended from the ceiling like curious insects, delicate manipulator arms extending toward the dish. The seconds stretched. The guard's grips on Garrett's arms tightened slightly. Not threatening, just ready. Theris watched the analysis with the same controlled expression she wore for everything. But Garrett saw it now, the way her attention focused entirely on the readouts. Real concern breaking through the royal mask. The results came. He saw it in the way the chief scientist's face went carefully blank, in the way advisors shifted in their seats, in the sudden stillness that was different from the earlier silence. This was not shock. This was fear. Your radiance, the scientist said, voice professionally neutral. The compound is sophisticated. It breaks down post-ingestion into benign elements. Symptoms would present as natural organ failure, untraceable after death. The hall did not erupt. It stiffened. Every noble suddenly remembering how to breathe quietly. Theris looked at the dish, then at the guards holding Garrett, then at him. Release him. The hands dropped away. Garrett rolled his shoulders, staying exactly where he was. Running seemed like a bad idea. You shouted at me, Theris said. Still calm, always calm. Yes, your radiance. Without evidence. Yes, your radiance. Based on smell. Yes, your radiance. She studied him. The entire court studied him. Garrett had been under hostile scrutiny before. This felt worse somehow, more personal. You saved my life, Theris said quietly. Did my job, ma'am. Your job is to taste the food, not to interrupt state dinners. My job is to keep you from dying, ma'am. Something flickered in her eyes, not quite a smile, not quite approval, something more complicated. She stood. The court rose with her automatic deference. She gestured once, a subtle movement that somehow cleared the hall. Nobles filed out with the kind of speed that suggested voluntary was better than compulsory. Within minutes, the grand space held only Theris, Garrett, Commander Dax, and a handful of guards maintaining professional distance. Theris walked toward him. Not threatening, just closing distance until they stood close enough to speak without being overheard. Someone just tried to kill me, she said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am. Someone with access to palace kitchens. Someone who understands Etherian biology. Someone who knew the scanners would not detect it. Yes, ma'am. Someone in this court. Garrett met her gaze. Saw the thing she was not saying. This was not new. This was confirmation. You knew, he said. Not an accusation. A realization. I suspected. She turned slightly, looking at the abandoned table, the poisoned dish still sitting there like evidence. My husband died the same way. This would have killed me. Clean, untraceable, ruled natural. You've been waiting. I have been surviving and gathering evidence and hoping I was paranoid. She looked back at him. You just proved I was not. The weight of that settled. Someone had killed a king, was trying to kill a queen, and the only thing standing between success and failure was a broken Marine who trusted his nose more than technology. What happens now? Garrett asked. Theris was quiet for a long moment, thinking, calculating. He could almost see the chess pieces moving in her mind. Now, she said finally, you stay closer, much closer. 3 feet was clearly not close enough. You want me as a bodyguard. I want you as a variable. Whoever planned this expected standard protocol, expected scanners and procedures and predictable responses. They did not expect someone who shouts in the middle of state dinners. I'm not trained for. You are trained to notice when something is wrong and act on it. That is what I need, not another guard following orders, not another courtier telling me what I want to hear. Someone who will shout when the food smells wrong. Garrett considered her. This woman who had lived knowing someone wanted her dead, who had buried a husband and worn a crown and survived alone in a court full of smiles and poison. All right, he said, all right. I'll shout when things smell wrong. Your radiance, fair warning. I have opinions about a lot of things. For the first time since he had met her, Thera smiled. Small, brief, real. Good, she said. I have been surrounded by agreement for far too long. She dismissed him with instructions to report at dawn. Garrett left through corridors that seemed to watch him past guards who looked at him differently now. Not quite respect, not quite suspicion, something in between. He had come here expecting to die quietly, professionally, alone. Instead, he had shouted at a queen and started a war he did not fully understand. In his small quarters that night, Garrett lay awake listening to the palace hum around him, energy flowing through walls, air recycling through systems, the quiet mechanical breathing of a building that thought it was alive. Somewhere in this place, someone was planning murder. Someone smart enough to fool scanners, connected enough to access royal meals, patient enough to have waited this long. And somehow, for reasons he could not explain, Garrett Hayes had just made himself their problem. His last thought before sleep finally came was not about dying. It was simpler than that. He had a job to do, and for the first time in a long time, that mattered. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Garrett tasted, waited, approved. Theris ate, observed, survived. The court watched them both with the kind of attention that felt like pressure. Every meal was a performance now. Every dish a potential threat. But more than that, every interaction between the human taster and the alien queen became fodder for speculation. Why did she keep him so close? What did it mean that he stood beside her instead of behind? Was this trust or desperation? Theris ignored the whispers. She had learned long ago that attention was the price of power. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. As long as they did not know what she was really doing. Because while the court gossiped, she was hunting. Late at night in her private study, Theris pulled files she had been building since Davion's death. Personnel records, cross-referenced with access logs, financial transactions that looked clean on the surface but showed patterns underneath. Communication metadata that revealed who spoke to whom and how often. She had been documenting everything, every anomaly, every inconsistency, every moment when someone's story did not quite align with the evidence. Garrett joined her on the fourth night. She had not invited him, but she also had not locked the door. He knocked, waited for permission, entered with 2 cups of the semi-sentient tea that he claimed helped him think. You don't sleep, he observed, setting 1 cup beside her. Neither do you. I have nightmares. What's your excuse? I am living mine. He sat without asking, pulling up a secondary display and scanning through the files she had opened. For a moment, she considered ordering him out. This was her investigation, her vendetta, her private war against the people who had stolen her husband. But then she remembered the way he had shouted in the hall, the way he had trusted his instinct over technology, the way he had been right. What am I looking at? He asked. Patterns, anomalies, the shape of a conspiracy I cannot quite see. You think it's multiple people? One person could not execute this alone. Access to the kitchens requires one set of clearances. Access to the medical systems requires another. Access to the palace AI requires root authorization that only 3 people possess. You and who else? Chancellor Mordain, Head Counselor Vesper. Garrett absorbed this. So either one of them is working with accomplices or they're working together. Precisely. Why haven't you arrested them? Theris looked at him. This man who thought like a soldier. Direct, tactical, unencumbered by the complicated machinery of politics. Because suspicion is not proof. Because if I move against a chancellor or head counselor without absolute evidence, I look paranoid at best, tyrannical at worst. Because my legitimacy depends on being seen as rational, measured above reproach. Even when people are trying to kill you, especially then, the moment I act like a frightened ruler lashing out at phantoms, I lose the support of the court. And without that support, I lose everything. Garrett was quiet for a moment, processing. That's why you've been waiting, building a case instead of striking. Yes, that takes discipline. It takes necessity. I cannot afford to fail. One chance, one moment, everything has to be perfect or I lose. No pressure. Despite herself, Theris almost smiled. Your humor is inappropriate. Coping mechanism. Keeps me from screaming. They fell into a pattern after that. Late-night sessions in her study, Garrett asking questions that were sometimes naive and sometimes devastatingly precise, teaching her to think tactically, showing her how to evaluate threats based on capability rather than intent. Intent is cheap, he explained one night. Lots of people want things. Capability is what matters. Who can actually execute? Who has access training resources? Theris absorbed it, adapted it, started cross-referencing her political knowledge with his tactical framework. Patterns emerged, clearer than before, sharper. During the day, they maintained their roles, queen and taster, distant, professional. But the court noticed anyway. The way she listened when he spoke. The way he positioned himself not as servant, but as guardian. The subtle shift from employer and employee to something that looked dangerously like partnership. Chancellor Mordain noticed. Of course he did. Mordain noticed everything. Your radiance, he said one afternoon, his tone carefully neutral. Might I suggest that the human taster's visibility is causing speculation? Let them speculate, Theris replied, not looking up from the diplomatic briefing she was reviewing. Appearances matter. The court wonders if perhaps you have grown too dependent. The court wonders many things. I concern myself with staying alive. Mr. Hayes has proven effective at that task, unless you have a better solution. Mordain smiled, polite, empty. Of course not, your radiance. I merely suggest caution. Trust misplaced can be as dangerous as trust withheld. After he left, Garrett spoke quietly. He's worried. Good, let him worry. You think he's involved? I think he benefits if I die. I think he has the access. I think he is exactly the kind of man who would plan something like this and execute it perfectly. She paused, but I cannot prove it. Yet. The weeks turned. Meals continued. Garrett tasted, approved, lived. Theris ate, ruled, investigated. The conspiracy stayed quiet as if holding its breath. Then one morning during breakfast in her private dining chamber, the air changed. Theris felt it first. The environmental controls adjusted constantly micro-corrections to keep the atmosphere precisely calibrated for her physiology. This shift was wrong. Too abrupt. Like the palace itself had gasped. Her implant screamed warnings half a second too late. Neurological interference. Airborne. Dispersing fast. Nanites. Theris did not think. Thinking took time. She slammed her hand against the panic stud embedded in her chair's armrest. Her personal shield snapped into existence, a shimmer of energy that enclosed her in a sphere barely large enough to breathe. Garrett lunged toward her, stupid, brave. Exactly what she should have expected. The nanite cloud hit him before he reached the shield's perimeter. She saw his body lock up, muscles seizing as microscopic machines began rewriting his neural pathways. He collapsed, still conscious, eyes wide, breathing in short, sharp gasps, unable to move. The shield would protect her for exactly 90 seconds. After that, its power cell would drain, and she would be as exposed as him. Theris triggered the emergency override. Palace security should respond. Guards should flood the room. The AI should lock down the entire wing and neutralize the threat. Nothing happened. No guards, no lockdown, no helpful AI voice explaining the situation. Just silence and the soft hum of her shield counting down to failure. Whoever had done this had planned for her defenses, planned for protocol, planned for everything except what she did next. Theris reconfigured her shield. Not larger, smaller, tighter, concentrated. Then she opened a gap, grabbed Garrett's arm, and dragged him inside before sealing it again. The space was too small for two people. They pressed together, her back against the shield's curve, Garrett's weight heavy against her chest. He could not control his limbs, could not speak. Just breathed in ragged hitches while his nervous system tried to remember how to function. Stay still, Theris said quietly. Pointless advice to a paralyzed man, but talking helped her think. 60 seconds remaining. The nanites outside probed at the shield patient as insects. Sophisticated design. Military grade. The kind of weapon that required serious money and serious access to acquire. She ran through the list of people who could authorize a security override. herself, Chancellor Mordain, Head Counselor Vesper. That was all. 3 people with root access to the palace's core systems. Someone was using that access to kill her. 40 seconds. Garrett's breathing began to even out. The nanites had been calibrated for Etherian physiology, not human. His biology was fighting back, metabolizing the foreign particles faster than designed. Lucky, if luck meant suffering instead of dying. "Can you move?" Theris asked. A grunt, his hand twitched. Progress. 30 seconds. She made a decision. Not the safe decision, not the protocol decision. The only decision that might keep them both alive. Theris activated her personal data core, bypassing the palace AI entirely. Her fingers moved across holographic interfaces that shimmered in the cramped space. Access codes she had never shared. Back doors she had installed years ago when paranoia was just beginning to feel like wisdom. 20 seconds. The environmental system responded to her override. Air cyclers kicked into emergency purge. Vents opened wide. The nanite cloud outside her shield began to disperse, pulled toward filters that would trap and destroy them. 10 seconds. "When this drops," Theris said, "you are going to lean on me. We are going to walk out of here, and you are not going to collapse because I cannot carry you." Garrett managed a nod. Barely. 5 seconds. The shield failed. Theris caught Garrett as his weight shifted, got her shoulder under his arm, and stood. He outweighed her by 70 pounds of muscle that no longer reliably obeyed his brain. She did not care. Queens did not leave their people behind. They stumbled toward the door. Garrett's legs remembered how to function in jerky, uncoordinated movements. His breathing came harsh against her ear. She could feel him fighting, forcing damaged nerves to fire to carry his weight, to not be a burden. Stubborn. Good. The corridor outside was empty. Wrong. There should be guards, should be alarms, should be people responding to an assassination attempt on the Queen. Instead, nothing, just polished floors and walls that pulsed with soft light and the kind of silence that came before violence. "They shut down security," Garrett managed. Words slurred but understandable. "Entire wing." "I know." "Your own people." "Yes." Theris half carried him toward her emergency bunker. The palace had dozens of safe rooms, all registered in official databases. The bunker was different. Personal. Secret. The kind of paranoia Davion had called excessive right up until he died, proving her right. They made it 3 corridors before Garrett's legs gave out completely. His weight dropped. Theris caught him staggered, kept them both upright through sheer stubbornness. "Leave me," he said. "No." "Theris." "I do not leave my people, not when I can save them. Now walk." He walked, shambling, graceless but moving. They reached the bunker access, hidden behind a wall panel that looked like art. Theris pressed her palm against it, and the wall dissolved. Inside, door sealed. They collapsed onto a floor that was clean and cool and blessedly still. For a long moment, neither moved, just breathed. Alive. Together, safe. Relatively. Garrett pushed himself up to sitting back against the wall, hands shaking. "You saved me. You were trying to save me. Seemed fair. Your shield. You made it smaller. Let me in." "Yes." "Could have kept yourself safe." "Let me die." Theris looked at him. This man who had shouted at her in front of the entire court, who tasted poison every day because someone had to, who had just thrown himself toward danger without hesitation or hope of survival. "You are proving difficult to replace, Mr. Hayes. I am being practical." He laughed. Rough and pained and genuine. "Right, practical." The bunker's independent systems came online. Screens flickered. Data streams initialized. Theris pulled up security feeds and saw what she expected. Guards standing down. Surveillance loops playing false calm. Entire sections of the palace operating as if nothing had happened. Someone had control. Someone with authority to override everything. "I need to find who did this," Theris said. "We," Garrett corrected. "We need to find them." "You can barely stand." "I can sit and think. You need someone who thinks differently than you do. Someone who doesn't play politics." Theris considered arguing. Decided against it. He was right. She needed perspective. Needed someone who looked at threats the way soldiers did. Direct. Tactical. Uncomplicated by years of courtly doublespeak. Very well. We hunt. Over the next hours, as Garrett's nervous system slowly recovered, Theris taught him how to read a court. She pulled up files, personnel records, meeting logs, financial transactions that looked clean on the surface but carried weight underneath. Garrett watched ask questions that were sometimes naive and sometimes devastatingly precise. "Why haven't you arrested Mordain?" he asked, pointing at the Chancellor's file. "He has root access. He benefits if you die. Clear suspect. Because benefit is not proof. Because half the court benefits if I die. Because if I move against a chancellor without absolute evidence, I look paranoid at best, tyrannical at worst. Politics is not about what is true. It is about what can be proven to people who do not want to believe. So you wait. I gather evidence. I watch. I document. And when I move, there will be no doubt." Garrett studied the screens. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since Davion died. Watching people I thought I knew. Learning who meets with who trades favors, who suddenly has access to resources they should not possess." "That's a long time to be alone," Theris paused. No one had said it quite that plainly before. A long time to be alone. Yes, it had been. "Survival requires solitude," she said. "Survival requires paranoia. Living requires trust." "Easy for you to say. You have been here days. And I've been shot at, poisoned, and hit with military-grade nanites. I'm having a full experience." Despite everything, Theris smiled. "You use humor inappropriately. It's a coping mechanism. Works better than screaming." They fell into a pattern. Theris showed him how to read court dynamics, who deferred to who avoided each other, the subtle hierarchies that governed a place where power was currency and information was gold. Garrett showed her how to think tactically. Sightlines, escape routes, how to evaluate threats based on capability rather than intent. "Intent is cheap," he explained. "Lots of people want things. Capability is what matters. Who can actually execute? Who has access, training, resources?" Theris absorbed it, adapted it, started cross-referencing her political knowledge with his tactical framework. Patterns emerged, clearer than before, sharper. On the third day after the nanite attack, she found it. Deep in the Palace AI's access logs, hidden behind layers of encryption and false trails. Evidence of tampering. Not recent, old, very old, dating back to 2 days before Davion died. "Someone has been inside the system since then," Theris said quietly. "Waiting, watching, learning our patterns." Garrett leaned over her shoulder, looking at the code. "Can you trace it?" "To one of 3 signatures. Mine, which I know was not me. Mordain or Vesper. 50-50 odds." "Less. Vesper is ambitious but not patient. This required patience. Years of it." "Mordain. Almost certainly, but almost is not proof." They worked in Theris's private study now. Safer than the bunker. More resources. Garrett had recovered fully, though he moved with new awareness. Testing his balance. Checking his reflexes. A man who had learned his body could betray him. Late one night, after hours of parsing data, Garrett spoke into the concentrated silence. "Why did you really choose me?" Theris looked up from her screens. "I told you, broken men do not scheme." "That's part of it. What's the rest?" She should have deflected, should have maintained distance, should have done what queens did and kept her reasoning private. Instead, she told the truth. "Because you understand loss. Because you have been betrayed by certainty. Because when I looked at your file, I saw someone who would rather die doing something right than live doing nothing. And I needed that. Someone who cared more about the bar than survival." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "That's depressing." "Yes. Also accurate." "I know." He rubbed his face, exhaustion showing. "You want to know why I really took this job?" "You needed work. I needed purpose. There's a difference. After Afghanistan, after I got sent home, I couldn't find a reason to care about anything. Then I saw the posting, highest mortality rate of any civilian position. And I thought, if I'm going to die anyway, at least it could mean something. Dying for a stranger. Dying for someone who matters. You matter. Even I can see that. This peace you're trying to build. This cooperation between species. It's bigger than me. Bigger than my damage." Theris felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction. Not yet. Something simpler. Recognition. This man who had stumbled into her life and refused to stumble out of it, who tasted poison and threw himself at danger and spoke painful truths with the same blunt honesty. Davion would have liked you, she said. Yeah. He also used humor inappropriately, also questioned everything, also refused to let me hide. He sounds smart. He was, until he trusted the wrong person. The weight of that settled between them. All the things she did not say, all the ways grief had turned her into this careful, controlled creature who trusted no one and loved nothing because love made you vulnerable. Garrett stood, moved to the window. Dawn was breaking outside, the desert turning from shadow to flame. I'm not him, he said quietly. I know. And I'm not trying to be. I know that too. But I'm here, and I'm not leaving until this is finished. Theris joined him at the window, stood close enough to feel his warmth. It may not be finished for a long time. This conspiracy, these people, they are careful, methodical. Then we be more careful, more methodical. He looked at her. You pulled me into your shield. You saved my life when letting me die would have been easier. That makes it personal. You're stuck with me now. For the first time in so long, Theris felt the weight of isolation crack. Not break, not yet, but crack. Letting in the smallest possibility that perhaps maybe she was not entirely alone. Very well, she said. We hunt together. Over the following days, they intercepted encrypted communications that confirmed what Theris had suspected. The conspiracy was larger than one person. Mordain, yes, but also Vesper, the head counselor, and 5 others, 7 in total, all positioned to benefit from her death. The messages revealed their reasoning. Theris's refusal to support war against the Kryn Empire, her insistence on diplomacy, her stubborn commitment to peace when war would have meant weapons contracts, supply chains, rebuilding efforts. War meant profit. Peace meant stability. They wanted profit. Theris pulled up diplomatic files one evening, cross-referencing them against the conspiracy evidence. The Kryn Empire had been sending feelers for months. Peace overtures, trade proposals. Emperor Kael, by all accounts, was reasonable. A potential ally if she survived long enough to make alliances. War with Kryn would make certain people very rich, she murmured. Garrett looked up. That's what this is about, profit. It is always about profit. War, peace, who lives, who dies. Someone is always calculating the return on investment. 7 against 1, Garrett said, reviewing the list of names they had compiled. Bad odds. 7 against 2, Theris corrected. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I'm not a politician. No, you are a variable, the thing they did not plan for. She pulled up a different file, one she had kept private even from Commander Dax, evidence she had been gathering since Davion's death. Financial trails, poison purchases, communications analysis, everything meticulously documented. I have been building this case from the beginning, Theris said. Every meeting, every suspicious transaction, every lie I caught. I needed proof that would survive any scrutiny. Proof that would hold before an interstellar tribunal. Garrett scanned the files, his expression shifted, understanding, then something closer to anger. You've had this for months, he said slowly. You could have moved against them. With evidence that looked like paranoia from a grieving widow that would have failed. I needed a catalyst, something to force their hand. And I was the catalyst. Yes. You used me as bait. Theris met his gaze, unflinching. I hired a man I knew would be competent, knew would notice things, knew would survive attempts that had killed others. Your marine training, your instincts, your stubborn refusal to die quietly. That made you unpredictable. That made them panic. You gambled my life. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. Garrett's jaw tightened. She watched him process it. The manipulation, the calculated risk. The fact that she had always known that hiring him would paint a target on his back. I should be angry, he said finally. You have every right. But you're honest about it. That's something. I will not lie to you, not about this. You asked why I chose you. Now you know. I needed someone competent enough to disrupt their plans and expendable enough that no one would question his death if I was wrong. Expendable. Yes, I am sorry that does not make it acceptable, but it is true. Garrett turned back to the window, silent, thinking. Theris waited. She would not beg forgiveness, would not make excuses. She had done what was necessary. That was what rulers did. At least you're honest, he said at last. I can work with honest. You are staying. Did you think I would run? I thought you might. He looked at her. I came here expecting to die for a stranger. Now I know the stranger well enough to understand why she does ruthless things. That's progress. And the job's not done. Relief unexpected and sharp. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't lie to me again. I can handle being bait. I can't handle being surprised by it. Agreed. They stood in companionable silence as the sun climbed higher. Two people who had started as queen and employee and become something more complicated. Not friends, not quite, but allies. Partners in a hunt that was finally nearing its end. The final banquet is in 2 days, Theris said. The pre-summit gathering. Every council member will attend. Every conspirator will be present. You're going to expose them. I am going to give them one last chance to try. And when they do, I will have witnesses from 7 different worlds watching. Evidence, proof, justice. Risky. Everything worth doing is risky. Garrett nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Help me reprogram the palace AI. I cannot do it alone. Mordain will notice if I spend too much time in the core systems. But together, working in pieces, we can lock them out. Make the palace itself testify. I'm not a programmer. No, but you are motivated, and I am an excellent teacher. They worked through the night, and the next, rewriting code in fragments, inserting backdoors that would activate only when Theris triggered them, turning the very systems Mordain had corrupted against him. On the final night before the banquet, exhausted and wired on stimulants that kept human and Etherian physiology functioning past reasonable limits, Theris spoke into the quiet. If this fails, they will kill me quickly. But you could survive, could slip away in the chaos. You should consider that. Garrett did not look up from his coding, not a chance. Garrett, you saved my life. You trusted me with this. You've given me a reason to wake up that's not about surviving until tomorrow. I'm not abandoning you now. Theris felt the crack in her isolation widen. Not breaking, but opening. Letting in light she had not allowed herself in so long. If this fails, she said quietly, I want you to know you gave me hope again. I had forgotten what that felt like. He looked at her then, really looked. We're not going to fail. How can you be certain? Because you're the most stubborn person I've ever met, and I've known some stubborn people. You don't lose, you just endure until everyone else gives up. Despite everything, despite the fear and the risk and the knowledge that tomorrow might end them both, Theris smiled. Very well, she said. Let us make them give up. The final code clicked into place. The palace AI, fully reprogrammed, waited for her command. Tomorrow, in front of witnesses from across the galaxy, she would trigger it. Would expose years of conspiracy in one devastating revelation. Tomorrow she would reclaim her throne, or she would die trying. Either way, she would not die alone. The Grand Hall had never looked more beautiful. That was how Theris knew it was a trap within a trap. Bioluminescent panels bloomed across the vaulted ceiling, casting everything in warm gold. The kind of light that made skin glow and promises seem sincere. Dignitaries from 7 worlds filled the space, their conversations a symphony of languages, both human and alien. The pre-summit banquet, a celebration of cooperation, a demonstration of unity, a stage for murder. Theris entered without hesitation. Years of fear had taught her that showing weakness invited attack. She wore ceremonial robes in deep crimson, the color of Etherian royalty, the color of blood. Deliberate. She wanted them to see her coming. Garrett walked beside her, not 3 feet behind, beside. The court had stopped whispering about it. His position now was clear. The human who had saved the queen, the taster who had become something more. Visible, symbolic, exactly what she needed. You're calm, he murmured as they moved through the crowd. I'm terrified, Theris replied, smiling at an ambassador who bowed. I'm simply better at hiding it than you. I'm not hiding anything. I know, that's part of the plan. They reached the high table. Chancellor Mordain already sat in his position, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing the expression of a man who had never done anything questionable in his life. He nodded to Theris with perfect courtesy. Your Radiance, a magnificent evening. It will be memorable, Theris agreed. She took her seat. Garrett stood close, his hand resting casually near the neural disruptor hidden beneath his formal jacket. They had discussed this moment extensively. If Mordain moved early, if the plan collapsed before it began, Garrett would buy her 3 seconds, enough time to trigger the emergency protocols that would seal the hall and trap everyone inside. 3 seconds. Not much. But then she had survived on less. The meal began. Servers floated dishes forward with practiced grace, each course a masterpiece, each one tested by Garrett with the same careful ritual. Scan, taste, wait, approve. Over and over. The rhythm familiar now, comforting in its predictability. Theris watched the conspirators while pretending to watch the meal. Mordain controlled as always. Head Counselor Vesper laughing too loudly at someone's joke. The others scattered through the hall, positioned strategically, close enough to support each other, far enough to seem uninvolved. They had planned this carefully. She had to admit that. Years of preparation, multiple assassination attempts, all building to this moment. The summit where Theris would either support their war agenda or be replaced by someone who would. They did not know she had spent just as long planning too. The 7th course arrived, a delicate arrangement of proteins and crystallized minerals that caught the light like jewelry. Beautiful. Harmless. Probably. Garrett tasted it. His implant hummed. No alerts, no warnings. He glanced at Theris, the question clear in his eyes. She nodded slightly. Trust. Clear, Garrett said. Theris lifted her fork. The hall leaned forward without realizing it. The gathered dignitaries, the nobles, the conspirators, all watching as she brought the food to her lips. She paused, set the fork down. The room shifted, confusion rippling outward. Had she detected something? Was there danger? Theris stood. The hall rose with her automatic deference. She gestured once and the servers retreated. Another gesture, and the doors sealed with a soft hiss. Locked, no one in, no one out. Now the confusion turned to concern. Guests exchanged glances, guards tensed. Mordain's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Theris saw it, the tightening around his eyes, the slight shift in posture. He knew. I apologize for the disruption, Theris said, her voice carrying easily in the sudden silence. But there is a matter that requires immediate attention. Your Radiance, Mordain stood smoothly. Perhaps this could wait until after. It cannot. She looked at him directly. Someone has been trying to kill me. Multiple attempts. I thought it was time to address this publicly. The hall erupted, not panic, worse, polite concern, murmured questions, the kind of controlled chaos that happened when powerful people were forced to react before knowing the correct response. Mordain spread his hands. Surely this is a security matter, not appropriate for a state dinner. On the contrary, it is extremely appropriate, since the person trying to kill me is in this room. More murmurs, louder now, guests shifting, suddenly aware of the locked doors, the armed guards, the queen, who had just transformed a banquet into a tribunal. Theris touched the control interface hidden in her sleeve. The palace AI responded instantly. Screens materialized in the air, holographic displays floating above the tables, data streams, financial records, communication logs, years of evidence arranged with devastating clarity. Chancellor Mordain, Theris said, would you care to explain these transactions? The screens showed money flowing through shell corporations, weapons purchases, bribes to palace staff, all traced back to accounts Mordain controlled. His expression did not change. Still calm, still controlled. I have no knowledge of these accounts. Anyone could fabricate. Head Counselor Vesper. Theris turned. These communications show you coordinating with off-world military contractors, discussing profits from a potential war with the Kryn Empire, a war I have refused to authorize. Vesper stood indignant. This is outrageous. I demand. You demand nothing. Theris's voice cut like steel. You lost the right to demand when you decided my life was an acceptable price for your ambition. She triggered the next sequence. More screens, more evidence. Poison purchases traced to 5 other council members. Meeting logs showing coordination. Messages discussing timing methods, contingencies. 7 names, 7 faces in the crowd, all realizing simultaneously that their careful conspiracy had been dismantled piece by piece while they thought they were winning. Mordain tried one final move. He activated his emergency override, the root access that should have given him control of the palace systems. Should have opened doors, disabled guards, created chaos he could use to escape. Nothing happened. The AI did not respond to him, did not acknowledge his authority, did not do anything except continue displaying evidence of his guilt. Theris allowed herself a small smile. Did you think I would not learn from my husband's death? Did you think I would remain the grieving widow, too broken to fight back? This proves nothing, Mordain said, but his voice had lost its certainty. It proves everything. You corrupted the palace AI. 2 days before my husband King Davion died, you used your access to disable safeguards, to ensure his poisoning would go undetected, to make his murder look natural. The hall went silent, absolute, the kind of silence that comes before storms. Davion discovered your conspiracy. Theris continued, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. He found evidence that you were pushing for war, that you had been taking bribes from weapons manufacturers, that you planned to remove me if I would not cooperate. He was going to expose you. So you killed him. The words hung in the air, the truth she had been carrying for so long finally spoken. Mordain's mask finally cracked. Not much, just enough. You cannot prove that. I can prove all of it. Years of investigation, every transaction traced, every communication recovered, every lie documented. And I have witnesses. She gestured to the gathered dignitaries, representatives from 7 worlds, all of whom will testify to what they have seen tonight. Vesper tried to run, got 3 steps before guards blocked his path. 2 other conspirators attempted to access their personal weapons, found them disabled. The palace had been preparing for this moment as carefully as Theris had. Garrett had not moved, still stood beside her, hand ready but relaxed. Not his fight, not his moment, just present, supporting, exactly what she needed. You killed my husband, Theris said, looking at Mordain. All the control, all the careful diplomacy stripped away. You tried to kill me. You would have started a war that would have cost millions of lives, for profit, for power, for nothing that mattered. We were trying to save the Empire, Mordain said. You are weak, soft, unable to make the hard choices. I am not weak. Theris stepped closer. I am methodical. There is a difference. You mistook my grief for fragility, my caution for fear. You thought a widow would be easy to manipulate or remove. You were wrong. She triggered the final sequence. The palace AI projected a 3-dimensional timeline. Davion's last days. The poison introduced to his food. The override that disabled detection systems. The falsified medical reports. Everything Mordain had done reconstructed with brutal precision. I have spent years destroying you piece by piece, Theris said quietly. Gathering evidence, building alliances, waiting for the moment when you were all together, when witnesses were present, when there could be no doubt. You killed my husband. I killed your conspiracy. I think that is fair. Mordain looked at her, really looked, saw past the careful queen to the woman beneath. The one who had survived, who had planned, who had won. You used the human, he said, the taster, you used him as bait. I used everything at my disposal, just as you did. The difference is I succeeded. Guards moved in, not roughly, not vindictively, just efficiently. 7 conspirators arrested in full view of the assembled dignitaries. No violence, no drama, just justice, methodical and absolute. Theris watched them taken away, felt the weight of years slide off her shoulders. Not gone, never fully gone, but lighter, manageable. The hall remained silent until the conspirators were removed. Then slowly applause began, not enthusiastic, too much shock for that, but real, recognition of what they had witnessed. A queen who had been hunted becoming the hunter. Theris raised her hand and the applause stopped. The summit will proceed as planned, Tomorrow we will discuss peace, cooperation, the future we choose to build instead of the war some would have forced upon us. Tonight we have proven that justice is possible, even when it requires discipline. She dismissed the gathering, the doors unsealed, dignitaries filed out in stunned silence already composing reports to their homeworlds. The human queen who had survived assassination and exposed corruption. The story would spread. Good. Let it. When the hall emptied, only Theris Garrett and Commander Dax remained. Well, Garrett said, that was subtle. Despite everything, Theris laughed. I am done with subtle. I noticed. How do you feel? She considered the question. Really considered it. Lighter, angry, vindicated, exhausted, afraid it is not over. It's over. You won. I survived. There is a difference. Garrett shook his head. No, you won. You didn't just survive. You planned. You executed. You made them pay for what they did. That's winning. No pressure. Commander Dax cleared his throat. Your Radiance, the tribunals will begin tomorrow. 7 worlds have already offered to provide judges. This will be public. Thorough. No one will question the verdicts. Good. Theris moved to the window overlooking the gardens. Night had fallen. The desert beyond glittered with stars. Make sure everything is documented, every proceeding recorded. I want transparency. I want the entire galaxy to see that justice is not just for the powerful. Yes, your Radiance, Radians. Dax left them alone. Theris and Garrett stood in the empty hall surrounded by the remnants of a banquet that had become a trial. You offered me positions, Garrett said quietly. After. Titles. Honors. I did. I'm declining them all. I know. But I want to stay as what I am. The person who says when something is wrong, nothing fancy, just that. Theris turned to face him. This man who had stumbled into her life and refused to leave, who had been bait and catalyst and partner and friend. The position has a name now, she said. Truth speaker. Official role in my court. No rank, no hierarchy, just authority to interrupt, to question, to speak honestly, regardless of consequence. That sounds terrible. It is necessary. You prove that. I prove that shouting in halls sometimes works, not exactly a career plan. It worked because you were right, because you cared more about being right than being polite. I need that. Every leader needs that. Someone not afraid to shout. Garrett was quiet for a moment. All right, I'll be your truth speaker. Fair warning, I have opinions about many things. I'm counting on it. The tribunals lasted weeks, every detail examined, every piece of evidence scrutinized, 7 guilty verdicts, 7 sentences to off-world detention facilities where they would spend the rest of their lives. Theris attended every day. Watched justice unfold with the same discipline she had used to build the case. Davion's death was officially reclassified as murder. His name cleared of any suggestion that he had died from weakness or natural causes. She had avenged him. That mattered. The galaxy watched and learned. Queens could be hunted, but they could also hunt back. The summit proceeded. The peace treaty with the Kryn Empire was signed. War was averted. The weapons manufacturers who had been funding the conspiracy found their contracts canceled and their influence shattered. Emperor Kyle proved to be exactly what the diplomatic files had suggested. Reasonable, intelligent, committed to peace. When he proposed a marriage alliance a year later, Theris accepted, not for love, for partnership, for the stability both their peoples needed. It was a good marriage, built on honesty and shared purpose. She was content, more than content. 5 years after the final banquet, Theris stood in a training facility built into the palace's eastern wing. Sunlight streamed through windows, overlooking gardens, where earth roses and Etherean shimmer bloom no longer grew in separate beds, but tangled together wild and beautiful. 6 trainees stood at attention, 3 human, 3 from allied worlds, the first graduating class of truth speakers ready to serve leaders who valued honesty over flattery. Garrett moved among them, no longer the broken Marine who had arrived expecting to die, still scarred, still carrying Afghanistan in his dreams, but functional, teaching pattern recognition, threat assessment, and the critical skill of shouting when something felt wrong. What if we interrupt and we're just paranoid? A young woman asked. Her name was Corporal Reeves Earth, military, sharp-eyed and skeptical. Then you apologize and learn, Garrett replied. But if you're right and stay silent, someone dies. I'd rather apologize than attend a funeral. Theris watched from the doorway, feeling something close to pride. He had become an excellent teacher. The students respected him not because of rank, but because he had lived what he taught. He dismissed the class and joined her. Your Majesty, how was the council meeting? Productive. The new members are significantly less interested in murdering me. Progress. Low bar. I work with what I have. They walked through corridors that no longer felt like a cage. The palace had become home. Strange, unexpected, but real. Emperor Kale sends his regards, Theris said. He'll arrive next month for the anniversary summit. How is married life? Diplomatic, respectful. We're building something stable. Not love, but partnership. It serves both our peoples. Garrett nodded. They had discussed this when she accepted Kale's proposal. A political marriage that secured peace and satisfied those who believed queens needed consorts. It worked. That was enough. The Truth Speaker program is expanding, he said. 14 new worlds requested training protocols this quarter. Because you proved it works. 0 successful assassinations in 5 years across 47 worlds. The statistics speak for themselves. We proved it works. You started this. I survived. You showed others how. They reached the gardens as sunset painted the desert in copper and gold. This was their ritual. End of each week, walking the grounds, discussing the work that never quite finished. Corporal Reeves approached with the careful formality of the young addressing power. Your Majesty, Commander Hayes, may I ask something? Always, Theris said. Were you afraid when you stood against them? When it could have failed? Theris considered the question. Considered the young woman who reminded her of herself years ago. Determined, scared, searching for certainty in an uncertain world. Terrified, she said honestly, every single day. But fear is just information. It tells you something matters enough to be afraid of losing it. The question is what you do with that fear. Let it paralyze you or let it make you careful. You chose careful. I chose survival, which required discipline, which required help. She glanced at Garrett. No one carries everything alone. You just choose your allies carefully. Reeves processed this, then asked with the bluntness of youth, do you still miss him, King Davian? The familiar ache. Softer now, manageable. Every day, Theris said, but grief changes shape with time. Not smaller, just less sharp. I honor his memory by protecting what he died trying to save. That's enough. After Reeves left Theris and Garrett stood in the gardens as stars emerged overhead. Years since the day Garrett had shouted in a silent hall. Years of building something that would outlast them both. Do you regret it? Theris asked quietly, taking the bow. Everything that followed. Garrett looked at her. This queen who had learned to trust again. This friend who had taught him that survival could become living if you found the right purpose. I came here to die, he said. Instead, I learned why living mattered to him. No, I don't regret it. Even the parts where you nearly died, especially those parts, they made the rest worth something. The desert breathed its ancient rhythm around them. Two people who had survived betrayal and loss stood together and watched the night settle into peace. Somewhere behind them, young voices were learning that courage was not the absence of fear. It was shouting in a silent hall when someone needed saving. It was discipline when fury felt easier. It was building when destruction promised faster results. It was choosing trust even after betrayal had taught you better. Queen Theris, who had learned all those lessons in blood and grief and stubborn survival, smiled at the human who had helped her remember what hope felt like. Thank you, she said, for shouting. Thank you, Garrett replied, for listening. They walked back toward the palace, toward students who would carry truth to distant worlds, toward a future built one courageous voice at a time. Some debts were repaid by surviving, some by thriving, some by making sure the future was worth the price paid to reach it, and some, the deepest ones, were repaid by teaching others that one person shouting at the right moment could change everything. The gardens grew wild around empty pathways. The stars turned overhead, indifferent and eternal. And in a palace that had once been a cage, a queen who had reclaimed her throne, and a marine who had found his purpose proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon was not silence. It was truth spoken loudly when everyone else was afraid to make a sound.